Hi everyone, my name is Alex. I'm the MakerSpace specialist here at the library, which basically just means I run the MakerSpace down on the first floor. The role of the room is relatively simple. We just help provide a lot of resources and tools and materials and stuff for people to come in and make things. So we have all sorts of different tools. We have 3D printers, we have laser cutters, we have sewing machines, all sorts of stuff. And we have had the honor and the privilege to host Genevieve, as well as all sorts of other artists-in-residence here. And it helps us out a lot because we get to learn a lot as well when the artists come in. I think that's the long and short of it. I don't think I have a whole lot to say. So if nobody has any questions, I'll pass it on here.
You can say when the MakerSpace is open to the public.
The MakerSpace is open to the public. Yeah. I thought that was like assumed. Maybe it's not right. But yeah, it's open to the public. So if anybody who comes into the library can use the MakerSpace. You don't even, at the moment, need a library card. So yeah, if you're ever around, come in, use it, take advantage of all our stuff. Always love having people. So.
Great. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm mic'd up. Can you all hear me? Okay, cool. Shall I turn the music down a couple notches? Let me know if I need to turn it down more. It might be a song by song kind of thing. Yeah, because I'm a DJ, I had to have a soundtrack. So, yeah, Genevieve Waller, she, her pronouns. So I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and because it's Pride Month, Happy Pride, I just wanted to start out by talking about Gilbert Baker. I made this flag, and I've done a bunch of projects about him and other LGBTQ artists, writers, cultural figures, politicians who are from my home state of Kansas. But I always want to spread the gospel of Gilbert Baker, born and raised in Kansas, created the rainbow flag, an international symbol, not very well known. So there is actually an artist who made the flag. He was called on by Harvey Milk in San Francisco to create a symbol for gay rights movement, and it's gone on and on since then. So I think all of this Kelly said. So I'd have a day job. I guess I like to be transparent about that. I'm not, independently wealthy. I don't really make a huge effort to try to make a living from art. So I have a day job at the University of Denver, awesome place to work. And yeah, I have a few art degrees in art history. I studied art and art history concurrently.
I'm going to turn you up just a little.
Turn me up? Okay. Yeah. So my background. And should I keep talking? Okay. Okay. So since it's Pride Month, I was going to talk about first one body of work, and then one body of work having to do with queer history, and then another body of work about the work I do in the darkroom, because I do have an MFA in photography, and darkroom photography is my main love. So, yeah, I made a zine as I was doing all this research about important figures from Kansas who I thought should be better known. And one of them, James Barfugate, he was an author. He was out in western Kansas in a farming town. He worked on oil rigs, very working class, but he was also a writer. And his book, Quatrefoil, it was published right after World War II. It's considered the first kind of, positive gay novel where the couple gets together and nothing terrible really happens to them. Most of the novels from like World War II era, somebody dies, the gay character dies. Movies from that era, it's always a tragedy. And this one wasn't a tragedy, and it was a big deal. It's called Quatrefoil, and if you've ever been to Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's a really important library there called Quatrefoil, named after this novel. And then, yeah, I made these name sculptures. I have a couple of them here. And I've started with the 6 people, but I keep expanding. I'm going to be doing a residency next June in Kansas, and I'm going to work on some more of these sculptures. But the idea is that these people should be better known, especially in Kansas. outside of Kansas, maybe they're better known. Louise Brooks, the silent film actor, I think a lot of people know her, but her origins in Kansas, maybe not so much. And then I've started adding to my sculptures. So those ones back there are going to start looking like this. I put these faux pink pearls on here to, brighten things up. The idea is to put their names in lights, to like celebrate them. And my aesthetic, I kind of like to decorate things. So Stephanie Mott was a really cool transgender rights activist in Kansas, and she died a few years ago, sadly, just natural causes, but she went all over the state trying to kind of raise awareness about transgender Kansans. She would have like panels. They had a conference every year. Very cool person, not that well known outside of Kansas though. And yeah, when I made these, I put them together for an exhibition that was in 2018 in my hometown of Wichita, and I was censored. The Catholic community, a segment of them, got upset, and they went to the bishop, they went to the president of the university, they went to everyone and got my show canceled. So it got some press. It's in the Huffington Post if you want to read that article. So yeah, a local arts organization, Harvester, they took up my show. And so this is an installation shot with some of my pretzels too. It was a huge space compared to the original gallery, so I was like, I have to bring a lot more work. So I filled up the space as best I could. But yeah, and then this Chains of Love series, I put some here. I'm hoping that the radio folks from KFGM will wear them tomorrow in the parade. It's related to this, idea. So of course there's the rainbow colors, right? But if you know the band Erasure, they have a really great song called Chains of Love. It's from the 80s. It was a response to Margaret Thatcher's administration, a law that they passed in the 80s where it was basically a can't say gay law, where in no like educational institutions, the post office, like nothing with the words homosexuality, gay, lesbian, queer could appear in any kind of printed matter. So it was this moment of ultra-conservatism in Great Britain. So this song is like a reaction about breaking the chains of love. Like, what are the chains of love? We used to walk down the street holding hands, and now there's these chains. So making these chains, it's a very simple metaphor of chains that are completely ineffectual. So easy to break. And I think the pretzels are a queer symbol, but they're also just a ridiculous symbol. And I have worked with them. I have this kind of personal iconography, which comes out of a lot of times my photograms that I make, which I'm going to talk about after this. These symbols that are iconic that, I'll talk about camp, I have to, right? Okay, so when I was in art grad school, it's a time when you have to theorize your work. Like, making art is kind of a world beyond words. It's something where you're making things and you're not really sure sometimes why you want to make them, why you're drawn to them. And I took a class on the history of performance art in my grad program. It was awesome. And we read Notes on Camp, and it was an epiphany to have a language to talk about the things I was interested in. These days, camp has had a lot of backlash. It's, everything eventually gets, critiqued as we move on with culture. Things get more sophisticated. But I still think Susan Sontag's essay from 1964 is important as a way of someone finally articulating this aesthetic. She calls it a sensibility. So I just put a few quotes. The essence of camp is its love of the unnatural, of artifice and exaggeration. Camp is a certain mode of aestheticism. It is one way of seeing the world as an aesthetic phenomenon. Camp is a vision of the world in terms of style. It's a love of the exaggerated, the off, the things being what they're not. The hallmark of camp is the spirit of extravagance. Camp is a woman walking around in a dress made of 3 million feathers. Camp is art that proposes itself seriously, but cannot be taken altogether seriously because it's too much. So many of the objects prized by camp taste are old-fashioned, out of date, démodé. It's not a love of the old as such. It's simply that the process of aging or deterioration provides the necessary detachment or arouses a necessary sympathy. there's a lot more to this essay, but I thought having these concepts would help give you a framework of kind of, the place I'm coming from or these ideas that I'm interested in my work overall. You can read much more about camp, but a little introduction. So, continuing with the rainbow, I got interested in, I'm interested in everyday objects. I'm interested in non-art materials, which a lot of artists are these days, but there are a lot of non-art materials out there to work with. Scrubbing sponges. They come in 5 colors. They're a standard size. They're meant for scrubbing your kitchen counter, your dishes. And I wanted to try to make basically tapestries with them or rugs. Originally, I was making them to go on the floor. Conceptually, I just like the idea of taking something that's utilitarian and making it completely non-utilitarian. You take away its usefulness. And also, it's elevating it. It's thinking about it differently. So, and it's a kind of a limited, it's a way to have to be creative within a certain set of limitations. So you only have 5 colors to work with. They're approximately 4 by 8 inches. You can cut them different ways. You can sew them together in different ways. How many different variations can you make with that limitation? A lot of artists like working that way. It's interesting. It's kind of like the minimalist aesthetic, I think, a little bit, where you set rules for yourself and you follow them. I've tried, I guess, doing various projects, like exploring queer history, queer aesthetics, and one of them was my first ever public art project. I got a grant to do this temporary art installation in this, basically a drainage ditch that's just south of the University of Denver campus. This grant was only for temporary public projects, and it had to be on public land. So I couldn't do anything on the campus because it's a private school. And so I climbed down into this drainage ditch, down the little wire ladder with my bucket full of wallpaper paste and all these posters that I got printed. I did a bunch of research, and I chose kind of like my 6 LGBTQ Kansans you should know. I did 10 DU, mostly alums, but some current faculty staff as well, who you should know. And I got some help from the archivist of the university to find some really historic figures like dancers from the early 20th century. This person here, if you can see, Wendell Sayers, originally from Kansas, a really important lawyer, attorney in Denver. So yeah, people walk along this path all the time. Everyone who lives in that neighborhood, they walk their dogs, they ride their bikes, they have their kids in strollers. So it was kind of this, I had a built-in audience and had a little opening reception and mostly really good feedback. So, but yeah, the elements destroyed it. I replaced it a few times and then I gave up because it's just the Denver heat. If you've been to Denver, the summer is brutal, and yeah, things didn't last, but it was cool while it lasted, I thought. And then another thing I've done is drag. I hope you all are going to see some of the performances over this weekend. I think starting at 7:15 on the Pride stage tonight, there's some performances. Yeah, I was super inspired when I moved to Denver 10 years ago, just by how, I don't know, diverse the city is, how big it is, how many different kinds of people. The Pride Parade is huge. I think at least 100,000 people come there, gather for the Pride Parade, which is not this weekend, but the following. And so I just came up with this persona called the Dark Manor. And I did my first performance in 2015, just a quick performance put together by the Tit Wrench Collective. They do a big festival every year in Denver. They're kind of on hiatus right now, but they did it for 13 years. And yeah, a leather man with a heart of gold. It kind of looks a soft interior masked behind a tough exterior. That's kind of the idea. And I did a whole series of photos with him and his kind of objects, meaningful objects. He loves roses and lace and yeah, I think Roy Orbison songs. Maybe I didn't mention that. And so more recently, I've been taking this persona and doing some collaborative performances with my friend Mary Grace Bernard, who is a true performance artist. She makes a lot of work about her chronic illness. She has cystic fibrosis, so she is someone who looks perfectly healthy, but she has to do a lot to maintain. She takes so many medications. She has to do breathing treatments every day. She usually spends a week in the hospital every year because she's really prone to infections, et cetera, et cetera. But it's this life that she leads where she shows up to things like this and looks perfectly normal. Nobody knows. So she's made a lot of performances on her own, and we started doing this series together where basically I'm her caretaker. So this is actually footage from our performance in October that was heavily scripted. And we had done one more before this, but basically we were also bringing in the Catholic Church into this for whatever reason. She's from New Orleans, Mary Grace, very Catholic kind of name. And so we took the idea of the Black Mass, if you've heard of that. It's this lore of like subverting the Catholic Mass with, so one of the things is you perform the Mass, the Eucharist, over a nude woman's body. So we had each of the audience members get up and take, we had red Jello and red passion fruit tea. So one was the body of Mary Grace, one was the blood of Mary Grace. And we had people, do a little chanting. But then we actually, so everything was red. It was we completely transformed the space to be kind of like a devilish church, I guess. But the next day we went back and did some photos because you could see the red photos are a bit hard to see. We kind of restaged the performance for our photographer friends. You can see a little better now. There's various stages. It was very scripted. And Mary Grace made all of these whips, like sculptural whips. You can see one here with a black glove, and these are some, I think, little medication tube, kind of like syringes there. So she made these whips, and the night of the performance, after I got her all ready, we did the Eucharist. I tied her to the hospital bed. We took off her red negligee, and then it was time for the audience to interact with her. And some people were very uncomfortable. Some people really got into it. But yeah, basically they had to draw from a bowl all these little handwritten prompts that she gave them. And you had 3 choices: kiss, whisper, or whip. And so yeah, it was pretty fun seeing people's reactions. Some people refused to come up. Other people came up multiple times. And we just didn't really know what was going to happen. So that's kind of the way performance art is. If you're interested, it can be fun, but a little nerve-wracking. So, okay, it's kind of my overview of my kind of queer art explorations. I'm going to switch to photograms, but there are relationships. I'm going to draw them out, and I hope I'm not taking up all your time. So I don't know if you've all heard that Riley Bloom is doing a workshop about rubbings, trace images, coming up on Wednesday. Yeah, this is an overlap in our interest, the trace image. It's that image left behind, an object leaves behind in various ways. So yeah, I think it's a very conceptually rich idea. So just some definitions to start thinking about this. A mark, an object, a sign that shows somebody or something existed. A surviving mark, a sign, evidence of a former existence. A sign that something has happened or existed. It's the mark left behind. So bare feet in the sand, that's a trace image. The leaves, when they're changing in autumn, fall on the sidewalk. The tannins in the leaves leave their image behind. You know they were there, even though they're gone now. The sunburn that's left from your watch, your jewelry, on your skin, it's the trace image. So cameras photography, photograms, is in the same vein. You probably heard of sun prints. Those are really quite well known, but any kind of darkroom, light-sensitive process you can make a photogram with. So usually, not too many people have used a darkroom these days. 20 years ago, a lot of people had. But usually in the darkroom, you have your negatives, you put them in larger, You turn on the enlarger, it projects an image down on your paper. The paper turns the negative into a positive image. Then once you've made your exposure, you put it through chemistry, developer, stop bath, fixer, wash, and you get a final print that looks a lot like reality. With photograms, especially the way I do them, I put objects on the paper and the image is a negative because it's a reversal paper. And the images often look like either silhouettes or x-rays, depending on if the objects are translucent or opaque. History of the photogram. Some people say the Shroud of Turin is the first photogram. If you know about that, Saint Veronica, she supposedly during the Stations of the Cross went up to Christ and wiped his face as he's carrying the cross to Calgary, and his image was left behind. The sweat, the dirt, the image. But photograms, which are trace images, are part of the very beginnings of photography. So if you know your photo history, photography more or less starts in the 1830s. One of the inventors is William Henry Fox Talbot, gentleman scientist in Great Britain. And many of these first images, as he was experimenting with the chemistry, trying to figure out how to fix an image using silver nitrate to make the image, ultimately figured out a salt bath will fix the image. He used things like lace, lots of plant specimens, some of his wife's gloves, all photograms. And you've probably also heard of Anna Atkins, who was a pioneer using the cyanotype method. And even today, I would say 95% of cyanotypes are botanical specimens, and it starts with her, pretty much. Beautiful work. But there's some people who are not as well known. I just want to show you like all the possibilities of what photograms can be. I think this artist is really cool where she's using botanical leaves mostly and actually making samplers, sayings like you would cross stitch basically. And then in the late 1910s, early 1920s, in Europe, there's 3 different people who kind of rediscovered the photogram process, and the way the narrative usually goes is they made it modern. So one is Laszlo Moholy-Nagy at the Bauhaus in Germany. You can see using letters that are cut out, objects that he made. And then, in the US, a lot of people over the years have been experimenting with them. Robert Heineken, you may or may not know his work, but he did a whole really awesome series called Are You Ray, where he took fashion magazine pages, which are printed on both sides, and put that on the photo paper, expose it to light, and the image you get is of both sides of the magazine page. It's a palimpsest kind of image. This really awesome Japanese artist doing huge photograms using silhouettes of people, sometimes famous people, playing with negative and positive paper. So usually the paper I use will have, like the one on the far left, a black background, and then anything that blocks the light is gray or white. But here, this is a positive paper where wherever the light hits, it turns white, and wherever it's blocked, it turns black. And this is a contemporary artist who is in New Jersey, who I met a few years ago, who does lots of interesting things with photograms. The middle image is part of a paper airplane series he did, where he would fold up the photo paper, make a paper airplane with it, and then expose it to light, unfold it, put it through the chemistry, and you have this folded image of, but the negative and so forth. This is from a game of chess. He did a whole series where he recreated important chess games in history. So the places where the chess pieces were left longer, it's whiter. The ones that moved or got taken away are more gray. And then I love talking about this artist because she made children's books with photograms, more famous in the 1970s, but they're beautiful books. You can still find them at libraries everywhere. Wonderful picture books. Okay, so then there's me. So I like to use objects, a lot of recognizable objects, so you can see my list. And I sometimes like to list them all because I think that's interesting, and it has a meaning too if you put it in the title card. Plastic tubing, bamboo skewers, ribbons, necklaces, including one necklace that belonged to my grandmother. So I made a bunch of the necklaces, but one was hers. So I'm kind of interested in geometric abstraction. If you know what came after abstract expressionism, people like Barnett Newman, Kenneth Nolan, mostly a bunch of dudes making giant paintings, but very decorative from our point of view now. And so I'm interested in kind of calling up the decorative aspect of geometric abstraction. But yeah, when I moved to Denver 10 years ago, I also started getting interested in the nuclear history of the West for whatever reason. It connects, I'll show you in a minute. So one of the first series I did there using the rental darkroom at the Colorado Photographic Arts Center was the series called Science for Strangers, where I used my kind of usual arsenal of objects, like these are googly eyes, and this is Easter grass. This is sushi grass. These are beads. I could go on. But to try to mimic the aesthetic of science, and nowadays when you try to say anything critical about science, it sounds like you're a truth denier, but this is more about the ethics of science, thinking about the people who were at the Trinity test site, making the first atomic bombs, like this ethics of, those kinds of science experiments where the effect can be devastating for humanity. So I was really inspired actually by a band called Oppenheimer Analysis, if you've ever heard of them, named after Robert Oppenheimer. Everyone knows who he is now because of the recent movie, but in the 1980s, not as well known when this band was coming out. And the main singer, he actually dresses like Robert Oppenheimer with the iconic hat. But they have a really wonderful album called New Mexico, and it's all critical of the nuclear history that's there, which is very embedded in the culture. If you go there, if you go to Los Alamos, it says, what does it say? It says where invention, it's a very Black humor approach to embracing the nuclear tragedies of Native Americans having to mine uranium and getting sick, of like the bombs being tested there and then the people who are downwind getting sick from the radiation, like all the things they have. There's a beef jerky there called Fat Boy, named after the bomb. I think the baseball team in Albuquerque is called the Isotopes. It's interesting. It's very interesting. So just so you know a little history, the White Sands Mistral Range, you can actually go visit it once a year. There's a whole nuclear tourism circuit I learned about. I went on there. And yeah, that is where the first test was, I believe. And so making sense of it all, one of the things I was interested in, I learned about, is this image on the left, trinitite. It's this kind of green glass that was created from the heat of the bomb tests left behind. And they made jewelry out of it. And I just think, once again, it's this kind of strange embrace of death that I think is very interesting, where you take something that is meant to annihilate thousands of people, and what's left over from it, you turn it into a decorative object. You kind of embrace it in a strange way. So one of the cool people I learned about who's been doing kind of activist drag about this is this drag queen who I think she's actually kind of retired, but she goes by the name Nuclear Waste. I love her outfits. And so, yeah, around Denver, there are a couple places where they were doing nuclear testing. And so her backstory is that she was raised in one of those areas. And so she has 3 breasts and she's radioactive. And kind of like having this humorous take on something terrible, a way to kind of to talk about it, but make people maybe think about it more deeply, because this humorous approach I think is interesting. So I did an online residency during COVID, so it was like December 2020 to April 2021 through a place in the UK called the Land Art Agency, and it was called Sustainable Futures, and it was all about outer space, about sustainability in outer space. So that sounds like a stretch, but I was connecting to it through my interest in this weird approaches to the nuclear history of the American West. And one of the things I learned through the residency is about this whole discipline called discard studies. If you're interested in like trash as a conceptual thing and all the ways we can approach it, I really recommend looking at the discardstudies.com website. They have different modalities, different theorists who've gone into theorizing what it means, how we approach it. And my favorite theorist was the one talking about camp and trash, right? So maybe I'll just read this quote from Guy Schaefer. As a mode of thinking through and beyond and before binaries, or perhaps of thinking binaries promiscuously, queer theory is indispensable to the study of disposal. In particular, the merits of camp as a queer mode of reading trash can blur and transgress and cover and glitter those boundaries between waste and not waste that are central analytics and discard studies. While camp is a useful mode of reading for any field of study marked by questionable binaries, it's particularly relevant with regards to waste because camp is all about the reevaluation of culture's trash. Camp offers a mode of celebrating, reappropriating, and rendering waste visible without pretending that waste has stopped being waste. So, nice little encapsulation of this way that we can think about queer theory and trash. I also learned about, did you all know that there's a giant ring of space junk that orbits the Earth? A different way to think about space, that we've actually polluted space quite a bit in addition to our own Earth. So yeah, these are some of the visuals. I think some of these are actually animations you can find online of showing the ring of space junk as it orbits the Earth. So I was kind of inspired by all of this. And for the residency, I made some new photograms, imagining that the space junk orbiting the Earth was jewelry, necklaces, and the way that I use the photogram process where objects are floating in the blackness of the paper, it's like the objects are floating in space. I see it that way often, which is different than drawing on a white piece of paper. It's a very different figure-ground relationship. So yeah, I collected milk jug rings that kind of go around the cap of your milk jug, and the what do you call them? The 6-pack plastic rings that go on your pop or beer or whatever. And I made some photograms. I also made some actual necklaces, like the one in the middle, and then I made a photogram of it. Just playing with, like, what if this is what you'd be on your spaceship in space and you suddenly see all these like necklaces flying by. It was an idea. I experimented with some other things too. I took some photos with the idea that someone was like floating in space with their space junk, like floating along and grabbing onto the space junk as they were floating there. So I hand colored in on these photos with like silver marker, little bits of space junk, and blacked out the outside, just playing with these ideas a little bit. And then I had another friend dress up as an alien living on a planet who's been collecting her space junk, and she's made her own jewelry. So yeah, it was fun. I got to try some different things. I think my work was kind of the silliest of it. Everyone else was a little bit more environmentally clued in, and I was more like imagining some impossible scenarios, I guess. So yeah, 2 bodies of work, 2 kind of interests of mine. But to kind of wrap up, because it's getting late, I just want to talk about my magazine. I had a few copies there. It's a big part of my life in Denver, and I really consider it an extension of my art practice. Here's some images of the cover. As Kelly mentioned in my intro, it's in print 3 times a year and online. I want to tell people kind of how I got into this, just so you know it didn't come out of nowhere. Obviously, I went to school and read a lot of books and practiced writing, but one of my first grad programs was at the Visual Studies workshop in Rochester, New York. I was there for a year, and then I went on to Ohio University, and they have this really wonderful magazine that actually now is migrated to California called Afterimage. So I was one of the copy editors, and I wrote obituaries, and I kind of got a sense of what it's like to try to put out a print magazine every few months from working there. Oh yeah, there's my name. Just so there's proof, you can see I was on the staff. And then in my last grad program in University of Rochester, the grad students there put together a peer-reviewed journal. It's a lot of work. And so I started off as the book reviews editor, and then eventually I was the co-editor. And yeah, there's a different theme for every issue. And it's sort of, yeah, a good way to kind of learn about the peer review process, being on the other side of it, of trying to shepherd articles through that process and learn how to code HTML on the website and all the things. So yeah, in 2019, I had the idea of starting a magazine in Denver. You know, with the decline of journalism, there was not as much coverage happening. The Denver Post, they occasionally still have articles about shows, but the Rocky Mountain News was another major newspaper, had so many reviews of shows, and I think they shut down in 2009. And yeah, there just weren't people writing about the art scene there. So one of my big inspirations was a publication called Carla that's in Los Angeles, Contemporary Art Review LA. So Lindsay Preston Zappa, she started in 2015. She moved there, thought there should be more writing about art there. She's an artist. I think the story goes she got a loan for $40,000 from the bank and started this magazine. It's quarterly. She does a podcast. She does a lot. I'm really inspired by her. And she helped some people in Buffalo, New York, start a magazine called Cornelia, not an acronym, but named after either the first or one of the first directors of the Albright Knox Gallery there, the major art museum in Buffalo. So I talked to the Cornelia folks because they were a little bit easier to get a hold of, and they gave me some advice on how to start Daria. So Daria is part of this lineage of people starting art magazines. Basically, the Cornelia folks told me the art critic for the Buffalo News retired, and they weren't replacing him, and so there was going to be no one writing about art in Buffalo, which is a city of like 1 million people. It's very tragic. So yeah, I started Daria first online, and then yeah, the first print issue launched in March 2020, and then everything shut down. No museums were open, no galleries. So it started up again in print in the fall of 2020, and been going ever since. We're working on the 13th issue, which comes out in July. Just some screen grabs from the webpage. Basically, our format is we publish one article online every week. We have a huge exhibitions calendar that's online and in print. So it's supposed to be your guide if you want to go do some art tourism. If you're in downtown Denver, if you're in Boulder, if you go to Pueblo and Colorado Springs, you can use our online or print guide and find out what shows are up currently, what are the gallery hours. Maybe I'll call ahead and see if they're really open today, that sort of thing. Yeah, we have a calendar submission form. It's all funded through advertising, print advertising. And yeah, we also do a bi-weekly newsletter, and that has a guide of all the exhibitions that are opening in the next 2 weeks and all the exhibitions are closing in the next 2 weeks. So that's also a guide for people who want to see shows. And just a little bit about the format, in case you're interested, and you saw some examples of them here. We do one artist profile in every issue, so an in-depth look at one artist in Denver, or really in Colorado. That's the parameter, it has to be within Colorado. And then usually, 4 reviews, so sometimes it's 3 of shows within Denver proper, and then reviews outside of Denver in the Colorado Front Range. So basically right now the Rocky Mountains are kind of the cutoff, and we go cover things along the I-25 corridor, eastern part of Colorado. And we always have a last page article at the back, kind of about a public work of art, usually a single work of art, an in-depth kind of look. Calendar is divided by region. We have 9 different regions right now. And right now, yeah, it's 88 pages, 8 by 10, so on and so forth. Just so you know how, I want to make it like easier for people to know how these things happen. So if you ever want to start a magazine, it's not that hard. You just have to do some of these things. So, and yeah, we start planning out each magazine 2 months before. It takes that long to do it. And I get to curate and choose what exhibitions get reviewed, which artists get profiled. So I'm always trying to make sure we have a variety of artists, a variety of shows and venues. But with the lead time you need for print, most of the shows we review end up being at museums because museums have shows up for longer. A lot of galleries, it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and that's just not enough time for print. But we do purely online reviews of those shorter shows. Yeah. And then 2 last things. I help run the community garden at the University of Denver. This is my 6th year. And I don't know, Garden City Harvest is basically a community garden, so you probably know a lot of the schools here I think have them as well. But it's an awesome thing to be part of. It's a lot of people management, but people make friends, people help each other learn how to garden, and it's been a really important part of my life at the University of Denver. Very last slide. Radio, college radio. I've been doing it for a long time. I really started at the University of Rochester back in 2002 when I was at the Visual Studies workshop, and then I moved to Ohio and I did it there. Moved back to Rochester for a PhD program, and I was on the student station there for quite a long time. My show was called There's No Tomorrow. If you know, that's a version of O Solo Mio, the Italian song. And then up until recently, I was on the student radio station in Boulder, Colorado called Radio 1190, and that one's still going strong, thank goodness. And then every Monday night since I've been here, basically, not the first night because that was when I first arrived, I've been doing a show on the station here in the library, Mondays 10 to midnight. My last show is this coming Monday. Riley and I are going to do it together. It's going to be goth themed, so please listen in. And that's it. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Tim? Will you take questions?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, Kelly.
I'm curious how Daria has impacted Colorado and Denver, because 13 issues with that many articles being written, that's like a lot. That's a lot.
It is a lot.
So can you talk about how that's impacted?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's helped the art scene a lot. There was no arts calendar that I knew of when I moved to Denver. I kept looking for, like, who's putting together the calendar? Sometimes gallery districts would put together a little flyer. So I think it's, yeah, some people say it's the publication of record for the art scene, which is cool. I like hearing that. I think, yeah, it's just added, the idea is to have critical dialogue about art and to record what's going on. So I think, yeah, it's definitely become a resource for people who want to see shows. I think hopefully it's also created opportunities for the artists that we've highlighted. I think it maybe has, you know, when we write about a show that they're in or their solo show, or we do a profile of them. I know not this issue, but the previous issue, the artist we profiled is a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. He's originally from Jamaica. He shows everywhere, but not in Colorado. And his work is really important, I think. And so I really wanted to highlight him. And I'm hoping, yeah, that having this profile of him will lead to more opportunities in Colorado. But yeah, he's probably in his 60s and barely ever had any shows in Colorado, which I think is a shame. So yeah, hopefully it's adding, I think it's adding to the art ecosystem, basically, by getting people to be more aware of, like, oh yeah, that coffee shop does have a gallery, that library, oh, there's a new gallery that just opened. In the new issue, there's a new gallery that opened called Seesaw Gallery, and we have a review of their current show, and then we're gonna have our summer launch party at the gallery. So I think hopefully that when we have our little launch party, I always send out messages to invite people. People will actually come see this gallery for the first time, and maybe they'll buy some art. Maybe they'll talk to the gallery director and ask if they can get in the show somehow, send her their proposal. I think, yeah, it's hopefully connecting the art scene more, making people kind of see it more cohesively and know what's out there, who the other artists are. Maybe people are collaborating even, I don't know. I don't even know the full impact, but I think it's important. I believe it is important. Yeah.
Yeah. Genevieve, we enjoyed a nice studio visit with you. Thank you so much for sharing all of these. It's wonderful to hear all of the way, or some of the ways your mind thinks about these things. Can you share with everybody a little bit about what you've been up to here and how you approach your residency and your research here?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I applied, I think you can rank where you wanted to be, which site, and I just chose the library because I knew I wanted to be where all those tools are. So that's what I've been doing since I've been here, is testing out all the different things you can do there. So I'd never made a 3D print before. Probably everyone else has but me, but I hadn't for whatever reason. So yeah, you can see a few examples of things I did over there. the pretzel, I 3D scanned a real pretzel, and then we made a print of it, and now I have to glue the two halves together to make it a full pretzel again. So I'm gonna hopefully make some more pretzels actually in different colors, and you can, once you have that scan, you can resize it. I might add a little loop so it could hang on the wall or be a necklace. Then yeah, this last week or so I've been getting into using the laser cutter. I don't know if you've ever used a laser cutter, but it's great for wood. The wood can't be more than 1/4 inch thick. So I've started making these boxes. There's a great site where you can design boxes of different dimensions and then output it into the program that is used for the laser cutter. And I have all these music boxes. And so I have 2 of the wooden boxes over there that I made, and we burned a little hole for the music box key to go out so that you'll be able to actually operate the music box once the box is closed. And I'm planning on painting them, adding objects. If you saw my small little pears back there, kind of beaded pears, imagine music boxes with objects that are covering them. And that's kind of my idea. And hopefully also that the theme of, like the visual theme of the box will match the song of the music box mechanism. We'll see if I can do that. And what else have I done? Oh, the sewing machine, yeah. Does everyone know they have an embroidery sewing machine down there? So you can actually design any kind of image as long as it's the right file type and get it have it embroider on something. It's only, if you saw the pieces of paper I have over there, it's about maybe 4 by 6 inches. That's your kind of work surface. But you can, move the paper around and embroider on something bigger. That's just a single embroidery session. You only have that space to work with. But yeah, I've been embroidering on paper because why not? And experimenting with, you can do, letters as what I've been mostly used to, but they also have a bunch of different kinds of stitches like chains and Greek keys. And I think there's a lot of possibilities with sewing as drawing, I think, that some artists have been exploring. But I'm interested in the presets on the machine and how you can use those to make something interesting. So yeah, that's about it, I think. Yeah. It's already 5 o'clock, so. Yeah.